Welcome back to Everybody Automotive Inc. Here today. We got the professional truck driver back finally. We had him set up for summertime. It just didn't work out. We got busy camping, and then I finally got him available so we can knock this out before we get going. Make sure you smash the subscribe button for me, hit the thumbs up at the end of the video, and notification bell so you know I'm posting new content. So the reason why I bring the professional truck driver in is, one, the best person to drive these trucks. He drives them all day. They just kind of switched to some Rams at his place of employment, but he's been a truck driver for 25 plus years, probably about 10 million saved miles under his belt, and so he can really put it into context. And he's been back on every one of my truck reviews to give his 2 cents on it. Now you're going to want to hold on to the end of the video because we are going to talk about the 6.8 liter and his thoughts on it, because again, we all know the baby Zilla is now the standard engine on Lariat and below, but for $1,000 I think, in my opinion, it behooves you to do that, but I will let him do it because he uses that truck way more often than I do, and I haven't actually towed with one. I've just driven them, and so it does have its limitations. So obviously, welcome back to the channel, Mr. Truck Driver.
Excellent, thank you.
So you did have an opportunity to drive the truck when we went out to Oglala, Nebraska. We pulled a couple fifth wheels down there, had some time to drive it, get familiar with it. We were hoping to shoot it, but now you're back in it today. Let's talk about your initial. What do you think about the exterior look of this truck? I know some people hate it, some people love it.
Well, I actually like the Tremor package. When it first came out, I thought it was a little odd. I'm like, why would you want that in a heavy-duty pickup truck? But the more I get to know it, and the more I hear about it and drive it like this, the more it makes sense to me. It's almost like the Swiss Army knife of a Super Duty truck. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds with this package. So I actually like the Tremor.
Yeah, and the Tremor looks good on just about every trim, whether you're an F-150 guy, 250, or even a 350. And we all know that you can't get Ram's Power Wagon or their Rebel package on their 1-tons. And Chevy also limits you to a 2500 also. So Ford gives you this huge off-roading package in a super heavy duty, I guess, if you will, an F350. And that is really cool. Now, you have some older Fords at work that don't have the side bed steps. So a point of issue was that some people think they're hideous and ugly, but functionality sometimes needs to trump looks.
Yes, so for me, my opinion is I don't like the looks of them. I really don't. However, I think the use of them and the availability of them trumps the look of it. Like, I'd rather have them and put up with the way it looks than not have them. So it's just so much easier to get in and out of the bed of the truck. So for me, it's kind of a catch-22, but I'd rather have them.
Right. And so other than that, as we work our way into the interior, some of your new work trucks obviously have some of the new look to them, with some of that stuff. What do you think of what Ford's done with this interior, gauges and everything like that?
I like it, especially the heads-up display. At first I didn't know if I would like it. I thought it would be a distraction, a nuisance. And this is my first go around with heads-up display. I've never really got to mess with it before, but for my money, yeah, I think I'd rather have the heads-up display. So I really enjoy it, and the rest of the truck looks great. I mean, everything is kind of where it should be and where you'd expect it to be, and it's pretty comfortable. So
yeah, and I think that we all have talked about it a lot. I'm sure he agrees. Is Ford's sync system may not be the most. I think it's a good looking system. It's and everything, but a lot of people think it just looks simple, but it's very intuitive. They leave you lots of big buttons and dials so if you're wearing gloves or you need to push it, you don't have to touch the screen. You don't have to be fiddling around with that. Everything is like right where it needs to be. And I think that's one thing they've done really well. I know he's told me before he's not really fond of the Baja leather color. That wouldn't be necessarily his choice.
No, not exactly. No. And the nice thing about the screen and the buttons is most of this stuff is redundant, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to use the screen. Most of everything else you can do with a button. I'm sure there might be a few things on there where you have to use the screen, but I like the options to use either one. So
right. Yeah, and you definitely can. Everything, like I said, is basically redundant down there. And most of it can actually be voice activated. Sync does really well with that, just about on every trim. There's a lot of functionality there. Of course, with the Lariat Ultimate, it even does even more, which is voice recognition, the buttons on the steering wheel, and everything like that. And I've told you guys before, and I'm glad he likes the heads up, because initially it is kind of unique with a lot of people. They haven't really used it or whatnot, but it is something that's very great, especially when you're towing or off-roading, to have that information right in front of you and everything like that. So we got him stopped here. We're going to go and see what he thinks. So this is the 430 Tremor F250 with the Godzilla. And so we're going to actually just stop at the bottom of this ramp and just let him get on it. We did a short from a 0 to 60 going down a hill, but I know some people like say that's downhill. And we're going to get his feelings and thoughts on this. So let's flip the camera around and see what he thinks.
Here we go. I love that 10-speed transmission. That's 60 right there. Yeah, she's, for a big bulky truck, it is pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's, not at all what it's designed for, but it just goes to show you with the combination of everything, you know, the big motor, the 10-speed transmission, 430 rear end, it'll still get up and go.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels slower than, say, if you had a 355 or a 373,
sure, yeah.
331, the diesel, whatnot. It's very deep rear end gearing, which is great for towing. But I mean, it gets up and goes. But does it throw you back in the seat? Well, not really.
No, maybe right off the very beginning, but other than that, you know, it's just like I said, it's not what it's designed for. So that definitely with 430 gears, this is definitely set up for towing. So that's what you want to be able to do is get your load moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's one thing with the 430. You can get the 430 in the non-Tremor, but if you do get a Tremor in the gas, it will be the 430 locker. And then if we switch it around and you go diesel, you will get the 355 locker in lieu of the 331. So again, it's all about getting the load moving, being able to slow it down, go in the mountains. If you guys have checked out any of those videos, we have tons of videos on that. And this truck, this gearing, everything like that does really well, even though this is more of the off-road one. What do you think of cabin comfort and noise? Does it do well with that?
Yeah, actually it does. We're just cruising right along at 75, and it's quiet in here. None of us are, you know, yelling at each other, and it seems to be well behaved, well mannered. And you know, with bigger, wider tires, you know, you always worry about it tracking a little bit in the roadways with the grooves and stuff, but I haven't really noticed that a whole lot in there. So yeah, it seems to be well behaved so far.
And he's been around too. So back when the V10s from Ford, so he's a Ford guy. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm a Ford guy in a sense too, because I like all the trucks. But at the end of the day, he's towed at the V10, and he's towed with the 6.8. We'll talk about that here in just a few. But no matter what engine you get, this is what we're getting when you're talking about interior ride quality and everything like that. And if you had a diesel, maybe it's a little heavier, obviously, so it helps tame down the road. But this thing does drive really well. I mean, considering it's got the factory 2-inch suspension, doesn't have a rake on it, so the front end's kind of jacked up. It looks like it has a 2-inch lift, if you will, bigger rubber, and knobby rubber. I mean, and it's not noisy.
No, not at all. I was actually a little surprised by that. So I think you're getting the best of both worlds with these tires. So you can do some, you know, moderate off-road stuff with these tires, and still sounds and behaves well on roads. So it's a pretty good combination. Pretty hard to pull off.
Yeah, and I think they did really well with it. I've driven plenty of power wagons, and they're a big grunting, rumbling truck, but they're really not for driving. This is you could drive and tow with,
yes,
and feel good about it. And again, when people talk about fuel economy, yes, it's great if the truck did good fuel economy, but we were talking about this earlier. Fuel economy is not what you get a pickup for, unless you're one of those people that has the Ford Maverick hybrid, and it's not really a pickup, but they want to call it that. They're looking for fuel economy, and they're not towing a trailer or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but as far as, you know, like I said, this truck is kind of the Swiss Army knife of trucks. I mean, it allows you to do a whole bunch of variety of stuff, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whether you're hauling stuff or towing stuff, some off-road. This truck is going to be able to do that for you. So I think it's a pretty good package. It's a good deal.
So of course, along those lines, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the 6.8. So I've had a lot of people come out and say, well, you shouldn't make speculation on how it tows without doing the numbers. So if we look at numbers, the 6.8 has 405 horsepower, 445 foot-pounds of torque. Compare that to the 7.3 at 430 and 475. Really, the 6.8 kind of falls in line with the Chevy at 401 and 464. And, of course, the Hemi comes in at 410 and 429. Now, I was saying before, they do have some 6.8s at work in crew cab F-250 form. And so we're going to talk to him about that because he's actually towed with it. I think it's a great engine for what it is, but I think it has its limitations. And because the 7.3 is a $1,000 add-on for $25,000, if you're towing over 10,000 or 12,000 pounds, I think you're pushing it. Even though it's rated for 12, I think that's asking a lot from Hemi. I think it's asking a lot from that, especially because the 6.8, guys, even though it's lower horsepower, it's a smaller bore, smaller stroke. It does have a cast crankshaft versus a forged, and we all know the forged ones are stronger, and the Godzilla has a forged one. But it also gets the 10-speed G transmission, which has a smaller output shaft. It does have different ways it holds the first gear ratio. I think is a little higher, so you can have a little more grunt because it's more underpowered. But now I have somebody here that can give their freaking opinion on it, and they drive bean cans there, meaning that truck is the lightest version of the F-250. Yeah. Vinyl seats are very, very basic, no power or anything, rubber floors. It's the most light-duty F-250, so that's where that engine should shine because it's not carrying the weight in the truck versus this one. It's a heavy bastard because it's got all this gear in it. So what are your thoughts on the 6.8 versus after driving this several different times? What are your thoughts on the 6.8?
So the 6.8, first off, I want to say I think it's a great motor. I really do. And I think it's a great improvement over the the outgoing 6.2 liter. So as far as that goes, I think it's a great motor. However, here in the mountains, the last time I towed with it, I towed a 10,000 pound piece of equipment in and out of the mountains, and well, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was kind of scary, and it's kind of it's a little sluggish going up the hills, and once you get going back down the other way, it's trucks trying to set a land speed record, so there's just no way, and with a 10-speed transmission, you're really trying to gear this thing down, and I think I was in like third or fourth gear trying to slow this thing down or keep it at a moderate speed. And it was wrapped out in low gear, and you're still stepping on the brakes, so you don't want it wrapped out that high. So it's just, to me, it just wasn't set up for mountains. It just wasn't, I didn't feel comfortable with it. And so maybe out on the flatlands, out in Kansas, places like this, it's probably a great motor. You can probably even up your poundage, towing with that motor. But up here in the mountains, no, I wouldn't recommend that motor, depending on what you're doing. If you're towing anything over 10,000 pounds, no, I wouldn't recommend it here in the mountains. So.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've told people along the line. I do have some 6.8 guys that own them, and I said, no, it's rated at 18,000. And I think with that transmission, those gear ratios, because you're not going to get a 430 with the 6.8, you're going to be 373 at best. And again, the way it uses engine compression, the construction of the engine, all plays in, the bigger brake rotors and whatnot. It's all going to play into how that all works, and I think that's something people need to consider. I've told people to stay under 12,000 with a 6.8.
I agree. Yeah.
And you're saying even at 10, it was like, oh boy, yeah. Especially if you're going in the mountains. And I think everybody has the possibility of encountering mountain-esque issues.
Yes.
Or long winding hills, no matter where you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're going to find some big hills and rolling hills and stuff like that. Just about anywhere you go in the country. So, I mean, we're all going to have to deal with it at some point. So, yeah, but here in the Rocky Mountains, yeah, I would keep it at under 10,000 and below. So
right, and I think that's where I would always recommend and say we stay on. Now that you've had an opportunity to drive that, we've talked about the 6.8 guys. Again, we're not saying that engine's not a good engine. It's basically a Zilla, but it does have some construction in it that makes it potentially weaker than, say, a Godzilla. But and like I said, they use them all the time. It'll be interesting to see because they just bought some new Ram 4500s and some little like stick body or mechanic body 3/4 tons with the Hemi, so that'll be really interesting to see, to have him report back on that at some point.
Yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll get some reports on that coming up shortly. So
because neither one of us are necessarily fans of the Hemi, and we all know Stellantis is trying to tie Ford this year for recalls. But overall, your thoughts on the 24 Ford Super Duty? Was it better than the 22 that we had on here, the General? I think you and I agree that that's the best looking generation of the Super Duty.
Yes, absolutely. But as far as enemies and all that go in here, I like it. I think it's a great truck. I really do. I think it's if I were to in the market to buy one, I would. This is probably the one I'd get, something similar to this. So I like it.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. I always appreciate if you guys love having the professional truck driver back. Make sure you comment below. We're going to get him back, and then if we end up holding on to this truck for a little bit longer, extensive one, we haven't decided if we're going to go Power Stroke next time or Duramax or what we're going to do, or just wait till 26 to see about that hybrid. But if you guys want him back in the driver's seat, just let us know. We'll definitely do that. And then if we can, if Loki's still around this summer, we'll get him back in here and let him do some towing with the fifth wheel so he can get a vibe for it. Because if you guys have seen any of my other videos where I took the surveil past and everything with the trailers, this truck with its engine braking did actually really well. It did almost, I would say it did just as good as the Allison transmission and the other gasser, but over previous generations of gas trucks, these gas trucks have came so far and so good that I think it's definitely a win. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys always being here, and we'll catch you on the next one.